Hello, children. In the last video of social science, we discussed we started with the lesson The First Empire and Ashoka, where we talked about the sources of Mauryan Empire. Of course, we came to know about the vast Mauryan Empire, when it was established and when it ended. That is 321 BCE to 185 BCE. Then we talked about the sources of Mauryan Empire, how we came to know about this vast empire. The sources we learned that there are three sources. That is Arthashastra written by Kautilya, Indica, the book written by Megasthenes, and of course the third are the rock and the pillar edicts of Emperor Ashoka. Further, we talked about Chandragupta Maurya and then his son Bindusar, who was on the throne from 297 to 273 BCE. And then after that, we came to know about Ashoka, who ruled over this vast dynasty, vast empire from 273 to 232 BCE. Now, today we will be talking about the welfare measures, the administration, and of course, how this empire, how this, uh, I mean, dynasty came to an end. So, let's begin. So, when we talk about Ashoka, we find that he was a very just and a kind ruler. And of course, he was concerned about the welfare of the people of his empire. So he planted trees on both sides of the roads and built roads for travelers. He constructed rest houses. Then he got hospitals built, and these hospitals were not only for humans but also for animals. Apart from this, we see that he got a number of wells dug in his entire empire for the easy life of his people, as water is very important, and without water life would be very difficult. So he kept in mind the welfare of the people, and he got all these things done for the betterment of life of his people. Moving on to administration, Kautilya's Arthashastra gives us a complete information about the Mauryan administration. So the Mauryan administration was divided into four divisions: central level, provincial level, district level, and the lowest, that is village level. However, the city of Patliputra had its own administration. Why? Because Patliputra was the capital city, and therefore it was, it had its own administration. Starting with the central level, the emperor was the head, that is the most powerful person. He took all important decisions concerning his empire. Emperor Ashoka also traveled extensively to gain a first hand account of what was happening in his empire. He got direct in touch with the common people so that he got actual information what all was happening in his empire. He also consulted ministers, and his council of ministers acted as king's advisors. Moving on to the next level, that is the provincial level. The empire was divided into four provinces, each under a prince. So, a prince was the head of each province. The prince was assisted by many officers in the province. He ruled the province as a representative of the king. So, he was basically the representative of the king. He was the head of the province and he ruled over his province. But of course, he was under the king. Next is the district level. So these provinces were further divided into districts, and each district has a head who was called Pradeshtha. He was assisted by the Yuktas and the Rajukas. These officers collected taxes and worked as judges and kept records. They also maintained the law and order of the district. And the lowest level was village. A district had many villages. The most important person in the village was the headman. So, headman was basically the head of the village. Villagers, of course, assisted the government officials in marking the village boundaries and maintaining law and order, and, of course, collecting taxes. Then we move on to the city of Patliputra. So, the city of Patliputra was the capital of the vast and powerful Mauryan dynasty. According to Indica, which was written by Megasthenes, the capital city of Patliputra was a beautiful city, very large and of course very well decorated city. It was surrounded by a wooden wall which had 64 gates and 570 towers. And there was also a moat around the city for protecting the city from enemy attacks. Houses were made of bricks and wood, while the palaces were made of stones. A committee of 30 members looked after the administration of this city, and each board had a separate duty, such as collecting taxes, inspection of manufactured goods, industry, trade and commerce, registration of births and deaths, and comfort and security of foreigners. Moving on to the army, the historians consider the Mauryan army as one of the most powerful and remarkable one, which consisted of foot soldiers, horses, elephants, and chariots. The Senapati of the army, he was the head of the army, and there was an espionage system, and the spies were probably used for bringing information from various places. A separate department looked after the production of weapons. So, altogether, in a line, we can say that the entire army, the reason behind this powerful army was that it was very well organized and administered. Next, we move on to revenue. So Ashoka's empire was huge and it was expensive to maintain it. Of course, the huge army, huge empire, such a big sized empire. Of course, the expenses were also quite high. So land revenue was the main source of income. The land revenue was fixed between one fourth and to one sixth of whatever the produce, that depended upon the fertility of the soil. So, whatever the produce was, the farmer had to pay the tax accordingly. Trade was also very well developed. Patliputra, Broch, Ujjain, Takshila were important trading centers, and even overseas trade was also carried out during this time. The main countries with which the trading was done was Sri Lanka, Rome, Egypt, and China. Arthashastra clearly mentions about several taxes like forest tax, mine tax, and of course water tax. So all these money was collected through tax and was spent on paying salaries to government officers and of course for public welfare activities. Now the next question is how this uh, empire, how this dynasty came to an end. After the death of Ashoka, Ashoka ruled over this vast empire from 273 to 232 BCE. So, after the death of Ashoka in the year 232 BCE, a series of weak rulers took charge of the Mauryan Empire, that is, his descendants. His successors were not as strong and as, powerful like Ashoka, right? And therefore, this brought about a decline in this empire. The governors of distant provinces took advantage of their weaknesses and they declared themselves independent. They no longer, since the center became, less powerful, the heads of the provinces, distant provinces, they took an advantage of this weak king, weak administration, and they separated themselves from this, from the center, and declared themselves independent. The entire administrative system deteriorated, ultimately leading to the disintegration of the empire. The last Mauryan ruler, Brihadrarath, was killed by the commander in chief of his army, his own army. The person who, the commander in chief of his army was Pushyamitra Sangha, and he was killed. Brihadrarath was killed in the year 185 BCE by Pushyamitra Sangha, and this brought about an end to this once very powerful and strong uh, empire, the strong rule. It came to an end, and from here started the Sangha dynasty. So, with this, we end the lesson. I hope the lesson is very clear to everyone. So, please read and revise. We'll see you again in the next video. Thank you so much.